working with CLAY, the Asian Center for Leadership and Excellence. I am the program director and have been a research head for the past 5 years. So as we just mentioned, CLAY is a leadership institution, but also very involved in research activity, and that's one of the components that I'm leading. Passing on to my next colleague.
Okay. Hello, my name is Fina Robia. I am a PhD candidate at the Friedman School of Nutrition at Tufts University. But among the other hats I wear is working with a number of Asian NGOs, including Future Generations Haiti, which is a close partner of CLAY, and support to some of the community organizations that Roby is going to mention shortly.
Hi everyone, my name is Rino Wobia from Haiti. I'm working with Future Generation Haiti, but most of my time is to compete the social movement, compete SOLEIL. And in the last, let's say 2 years, we've been focusing in compete Bibliothèque Cité Soleil, which is the compete library. And my background is community change and peace building.
Robin, you're on mute.
Sorry, thanks. Wonderful. It's, we're all excited to have you here. And just a reminder to, if you're not speaking, to mute your microphones. And if also for people who came in later, if you want to change your name in Zoom so that it's your preferred name followed by your where you are, that would be great. Okay. So we're just going to go over a few things around Zoom, just some basic Zoom. Maybe some of you are familiar with Zoom, and this might be not your first session at this unconference. So we're just going to highlight some Zoom basics. So just to say, okay, thanks. And can we go to the Zoom basics? There we go. So just to mute your mic, if you want to speak, please raise your hands. And we will, the host team will be monitoring that collectively. We encourage everyone to share their cameras, but also if you don't feel comfortable having your camera on, we totally understand. It's not a requirement. Also, so that you know, this session is being recorded, and the recordings will be used by the conference organizers and in the session hosts for reflective practice and gathering knowledge and things like this. But the sessions will also be, the recordings will also be shared publicly, so you know how they're going to be used. Just so that you know, this is not always what is known about Zoom meetings when they're recorded, is that recordings also record the chats. And that includes the everyone chat, but also any private chats. And we encourage you to use the chat to post your ideas, reflections, and questions. We want this to be interactive and engaging. Okay. Somebody, just to go over the agenda. So the introductions and some housekeeping. So we've done that. And you're posting your introductions in the chat, which is great. Keep doing that. And we thought we would start with going over and kind of collectively gathering what our ideas are about the key concepts, or some of the key concepts that are part of this session that are kind of maybe unique or new, or is being seen in a new way in this session on ABCD, conflict transformation and peace building. So from there, we're going to talk more about the peace building continuum and looking at principles of peace building as linked to ABCD. Then we're going to focus on a case study. And then we're going to put you into breakout groups and to do some interactive discussions and kind of really getting more deeply into what are your thoughts about this and how might the ideas that we're talking about in this session connect to what you know and to your practice. And then we'll come back together and and share what was discussed in the breakout rooms, and then we'll do a closing wrap up. All right. Awesome. Okay. So Kate, so you don't need to share the PowerPoint right now. Can you stop sharing? Okay, thanks. Okay, so as I said, we wanted to take some time to kind of dig more deeply. Well, let me back up a bit and say a little bit more about how this session kind of came about. So I have a strong interest in peace building. It's a major area of my research and my teaching, as well as my practice, as well as conflict transformation, particularly in regards to education and community development. And years ago, I was introduced to the concept of ABCD, and I found it really fascinating, and started to see the intersections between grassroots community-based conflict, peace building, and asset-based community development. And thinking about what would it be like to look at asset-based community development or community development and peace assets for community development. And working at CODI, have had now the opportunity most recently to connect with CLAY, which is an organization that does this in practice. And so we're going to be sharing some of our ideas and what is going on in regards to this. And so everybody here has experience and works in some capacity, either through knowing or doing asset-based community development. The area of peace building and conflict transformation might be new to people, but that doesn't mean that we don't already have knowledge and ideas about what it is. And so by doing this interactive and thinking about it, we really want to draw on our knowing assets to try to come up, what do we already know and understand violence, conflict, and peace to be, and to think about how we can use this in regards to thinking about our ABCD practice. So to start, what I'd like us to do is to think about, what does conflict mean to us? Okay, and I'm posting a link in the chat to a Padlet. Padlet is an interactive virtual sticky wall, if you want to say. And so I encourage you to go to the Padlet, and under the column that says violence is, put in a comment, or what is violence to you? So you'll see under the column, there is a circle with a plus sign in it. So if you go to that, you should be able to add your comments. So here I brought it up. So right now, if we just address what violence is.
And if anybody has anything to add with their voice, feel free to do so as well.
Mm-hmm. Okay, thank you. So this is my first time sharing a Padlet on a screen, and I'm realizing I can't necessarily scroll down very well to see all the to see all the comments, but maybe some members of the team can also kind of highlight what they're seeing in regards to the responses to what violence is. I'm seeing that violence can be something physical. It can be something that can be hurtful, so not necessarily physical, but can still harm an individual. It can be emotional or play on emotions, dominating. So there's different things ways that violence manifests.
There's also, just to mention the ones that have been here, destructive, it's a liability, it is unnecessary, it is horrific. See here, it signifies a lack of understanding. Behaviors that negatively impact someone physically, emotionally, spiritually, mentally, hatred, verbal and or physical abuse, hurtful, structural, destruction, withholding connection, which is very interesting, causing harm to others, hurt or pain directed toward a person or group, possible to unlearn, self-violence and social violence, toxic energy, oh, and this list goes on, deliberate, covert, overt, sometimes unknown to the perpetrator, that's all together, denying dignity and voice through systematic silencing, fear, power over, anything destructive that separates us from ourselves, others, and the earth, impersonal / faceless, and lastly, it is abuse of power. So a lot of great analysis here.
Yeah, that's great. Thank you. Violence, as we can see from this list, is complex and dynamic, and it manifests itself in many different ways. So it hurts relationships, individuals, communities, and societies. So now I want to ask us to go back to the Padlet and fill in the second column, which is what our ideas of conflict are.
I'm sorry, Robin, so when you share the screen, you can't scroll down, is that the issue?
It's not working, yeah. So I appreciate, thanks Lucia
No problem.
for catching that. Yeah. So I'll just share my screen to give a sense of the picture.
Robin, there's a scrolling bar next to your list. Maybe you can use that to scroll and see all the
Yeah,
documents.
it's different when you're sharing your screen. Yeah. Yay for learning technology on the fly.
Exactly.
Okay.
Very good, Pastor.
Wow,
Maybe
so I'm looking. Yeah, what is it, Matt?
No, I was just gonna say maybe I can go ahead and read some of the
Sure.
comments people.
Yeah, that would be great.
So conflict is defined as tension or not respecting boundaries, moment of possibility. Someone has said conflict is an opportunity to develop shared understanding. Conflict is defined as well as differences of opinion or perspective, disagreement. Two people mentioned disagreement, or misunderstanding, very related. Frustration made physical, fear-based, productive. So conflict is productive. That's a very good sentence. Misunderstanding, deliberate or not. Ever-changing. It could be natural or opportunity for positive change. Conflict is defined as well as miscommunication, tension between values, perspectives. It's a way to learn, to rise above, opposing forces coming together. is defined as differences not easy to resolve. It's a knee-jerk reaction sometimes. Conflict is defined as not listening or a misunderstanding. I think we've seen this before. Hard-headed with the opportunity to become open-minded. Defense of rights, difference from disagreement. A result, not practicing deep listening. It is defined as inherent to human interaction. Or is it seen as inherent to human interaction? And misalignment of opportunity, of priorities, or of incentives. So a lot of thoughts, some being positive, some others being negatives. Some are seen as just as opportunities, and others as in the sense of relationship between people.
Yeah, and I also noticed in the list that there's talk about different types of behavior. So conflict is seen as perceived as behavior. It's also perceived as attitudes or knowledge. And so it's really fascinating to when so many people come together to share their ideas about what is conflict, to see the diversity of what conflict actually is, and to think when you're having a conversation with somebody and talking using the word conflict, realizing you might not be having the same understanding because it is so diverse in what it actually is. And what I think we can highlight through for the purpose of this session is that conflict can be something that can be challenging and destructive or hard to work through, but it can also be an opportunity to work towards something different. So now for our third go round, I'm going to ask us to go back to the Padlet and fill in the third column. So what is our understanding of peace? Okay. So I can share these. What we have here. We have a lot as well. This is fantastic. So we have peace, living freely without interfering with other person's freedom, tranquility, situation people feel good in, common understanding of living together on earth, living in a quiet enjoyment, productive engagement, a journey, a right to coexist balance, respect, empathy for all living beings, ongoing and active engagement towards shared understanding, power and consensus, acceptance, harmony, embrace difference as a place of strength, not division, practiced harmony towards understanding, ignorance, balanced flow, just access to well-being, right relationships, status of relationship resulting from dialogue, the future, ability to understand others' experiences, opinions, a feeling, the absence of conflict, living in harmony with what is, a lack of resistance, convergence around an issue or concern, a daily aspiration. So once we see a strong diversity of what people perceive peace to be, that it is a state of tranquility, it is also a state of harmony, it's also something constructive and active to work towards. And so what I really am appreciating about all the engagement and the comments is that we have these ideas that we can bring into this conversation to think about how does conflict transformation and working to address conflict constructively with asset community development to build peace, what could that look like? Okay. All right.
Yeah, and if I can maybe chime in here, I think this is maybe a good moment to then compare or talk about all of these, you know, incredible contributions, maybe in context of some of the more formal definitions of these things in the peace building literature, and see how those, not that there's anyone has a particular authority or hold on what these things actually mean, but it's just interesting as an exercise to see how these things are talking about in the peace building field and the way that we talk about them in our own kind of practice and work. So the U.S. Institute of Peace, again, no one is an authority on this, but their definition of violence is a psychological or physical force that has an objective to threaten, hurt, or mistreat someone or property, a person or property. So that is very interesting because it talks about psychological or physical violence. And interestingly, it talks about violence being intentional, that there's an express wish for harm there, which I don't know if all of us or even myself would agree with, because we, in the violences category, we spoke about it. Sometimes you think in terms of the violence that can be wrought by kind of privilege and unconscious bias, for instance, that might not be intentional, but it's still very real to the people who experience it. So that's just something to think about. And I think there's, you know, we got it made of multiple dimensions of violence. You know, violence can be physical, psychological, cultural, structural, and those are all aspects of violence. You can have the motivations for violence can be criminal, political, personal. It can be against a single person, or it can be wanton or kind of undirected. And again, I would kind of maybe think that violence can be intentional or accidental, because it's still, as long as it causes harm. And it's interesting when people see violence as entirely, this list was mostly very negative. There are other people who might argue that violence is a tool that can be used constructively. That's another debate for the time, but it's just some food for thought as we're going into this discussion. Conflict, similarly, the U.S. Institute of Peace, talks about it basically when there are just several groups of people who have just objectives that are fundamentally cannot work together, that are fundamentally opposed to each other. And there's multiple dimensions of conflict as well. You can have internal conflict, you can have interpersonal conflict, intra-group conflict, or group conflicts between groups. There are conflicts on local level, national level, international level. You have, I think people mentioned here, there's destructive conflict and there's also constructive conflict. There's violent and nonviolent conflict. And there's also what we might want to talk about, some words out there, is active conflict and latent conflict. So there are certain, I think as what's been seen, in the United States recently has shown, every society has fundamental divisions and pressures and power dynamics that just because they're not actively erupting into something that people would visibly call conflict doesn't mean that they don't exist, and that that's not real. And often a latent conflict can transform into an active one. So these are just some other ways of looking at those terms. But again, I think what the most important thing is that each of these terms means different things to different people based on your lived experience and that of your communities. So again, given that, and not to go back into just relying on the jargon, but again, it's useful to reflect on how these things are talked about kind of more formally in the peace building space. I'm going to share my screen. Here we go. So here we can talk a little bit about the kind of peace building continuum. Sorry, keep back to presentation mode. So we all live in conflict. Conflict is everywhere. You can be in what you might think of as the most tranquil community on the face of the planet, but as we showed, conflict is so diverse, it can exist in multiple spaces, and it is everywhere. Conflict is just people, it is everywhere. And that might even be national, local, or even within a family, or again, even within yourself. I think all of us have internal conflicts we wrestle with every day. So given the fact that conflict is everywhere, in theory, all of us have to engage with it in our work, no matter what we do, whether you are doing, as we'll see here, active peace building, or whether you are doing music, arts, culture, development. Because conflict is everywhere, we all have a responsibility to be aware of conflict and our place and our role in it. So this is a spectrum from CDA Collaborative Learning, which is an organization I work with, about understanding where you kind of fall on what we might call like the peace building continuum. So at the very least, this kind of towards the left hand of this slide is basically kind of a minimal engagement with conflict context. Basically, you exist in a place of conflict, and therefore every one of us has a responsibility to be aware of the conflict dynamics around us, and be what's called conflict sensitive. So conflict sensitivity is just being aware of those dynamics and ensuring that you, at the very least, do not make them worse. I think we kind of, in our discussions, we can talk about the many unintended negative effects of interventions that might have on making conflicts worse. Ruby will get into a bunch of them later when he talks about CITE SOLEIL. But at the very least, every human being, whenever we do in any profession, we have a responsibility to try to not make conflicts worse in the communities where we work. Still in the conflict sensitivity realm, it's a possibility that you're not explicitly doing peace building, but your efforts can work to kind of reinforce connectors and bridges in societies that can actually help to reduce conflict, even if that's not your explicit intent. And then kind of further to the right of this frame, we talk about more active, what's called peace building, where your express goal is to address and engage in the key drivers of conflict, whether that's at a local or a broader macro level. So this is what we often call, again, the peace building continuum. And so a handy way of thinking about this is you're doing conflict sensitivity if you're working in conflict, which again is all of us, and you're doing peace building if you're working on conflict. So just some handy terminology, but we're thinking about your place in this broader spectrum. For those people who are working kind of on conflict, there's also kind of a spectrum for how conflicts are managed. I'm not going to go too much into this because everyone has different definitions and it's not that important, but we talk about, conflict management, conflict resolution, conflict transformation. You may have heard these terms before. Some people use them interchangeably, but they do have some slight differences. The next slide I'm going to show you, we're not going to walk through it. I don't want people to be overwhelmed, but I just want to kind of get a sense of the diversity of actions that are considered kind of conflict management and intervening in conflict context. So again, don't be, with all the arrows. So you have kind of in the left hand of the screen, conflict, what's called suppressions. That's what we call maybe the use of force to basically work on what's called negative peace. Negative peace is what many could define as the absence of violence. So you can think of that, in terms of policing, sanctions, armed interventions, those kinds of things. Conflict management is where you're just trying to, conflict has already erupted and you're trying to work to make sure that it kind of doesn't get worse than it is. You're containing it and managing it a little bit to reduce its destructiveness. Conflict resolution is when, again, as it sounds, trying to actually resolve the conflict, bring it to a close. And then at the right hand of this column, you can see what's called conflict transformation, which is kind of a proactive work to get at the root causes of conflict and make sure that they don't come back again. And you're really getting at the fundamental drivers that gave birth to the conflict in the first place. And then you could expand this on either end to talk about kind of transitional justice, reconciliation, and those kinds of things. Again, the jargon is less important. It's just more talk about that there's a broad spectrum of activity here that you can think of in terms of what it means to work in, around, or on conflict. And that's kind of this broad umbrella term of peace building. So jargon is over. I'm going to now pass to my colleagues Lucia and Max to talk about how this all relates to peace building.
Hi, everyone. Yeah, so just to touch base a bit on the way that we kind of came together, some of the terms that Sabina and that Robin were mentioning, specifically latent conflict, as well as working in conflict versus working on conflict, is something that really resonated with us, with our work at the Haitian Center for Leadership and Excellence, where we are an ABCD organization and we work to support, catalyze different community development initiatives, movements, and accompany them in a variety of different ways. There absolutely is real violence and overt conflict that we do encounter, but personally or institutionally, we work more in the context of how to build solidarity, how to build collective understanding of everything that ABCD is about, a collectivization of resources, of assets, of priorities, and how to align those to accomplish the goals that the community shares. So it was really interesting to start this process with Robin and Sabina to really think through the role that conflict has played and how perhaps we haven't given it we have given it in our programming the kind of the utility that it requires for us to get where we want to go. However, we have not articulated it as such. And so it was a really interesting process to get into the jargon, which no one likes doing, but to get into the jargon to really say, okay, there's a variety, there's different frameworks that are brought to bear on different contexts, very, very different scenarios, but they have a lot of connection and they have a lot of roots that are aligned. So I'm going to share my screen, which is, and Max, feel free to jump in at any point here. Okay, so I'm a bit advanced, excuse me, guys. Okay, yeah, so given that most of the participants of this session are most likely much more familiar with ABCD, working in conflict versus on conflict, it was really interesting to think about how conflict transformation and peace building is a necessary element for successful ABCD, as well as how within the frameworks of peace building and asset-based peace building, you are looking at, just like I said, the different connections that analyze, that have the roots in some of the basic principles of ABCD. And so I wanted to first ask a question to anybody who wanted to talk about how conflict has played a role in looking at the direction of how conflict goes towards ABCD, and then we're going to kind of step back to think about how assets go towards building, peace building. But if anybody has any experience or any stories about conflict within the ABCD work they do. I don't know if anybody's checking on hands that are raised. I'm not.
I can do that.
Great.
Okay, any comment, any idea?
There's a comment in the chat.
Oh.
I want to see it. Lucia, could you do presentation mode? You're sharing the screen.
Sorry about that.
So from Dee Brooks from Australia, she said, in our organization, we have a process called the olive branch, and we apply an asset-based approach to it. Dee Brooks, maybe you can give a little bit of details about what is it and how it relates to conflict resolution.
Sure. So we've got a membership of about 50 people in all different kinds of work, but very much an asset-based organisation. And it's a process that we developed together because we're a bossless collective. So we're building the plane while we fly it. All our processes are. So as we kind of go through a conflict, we develop the olive branch process a little bit more each time. And a lot of it's based on peace building principles as well. So how it's asset based is we do it very slowly. It's not a rushed process by any means, and not every member's actually gone through one. And we're always very open about how we will approach this based on our strengths. And so if there's someone who has a particular strength in a style of mediation or something that works particularly for whatever the conflict is, then they will be what we call a host of that process. And we work through it slowly but timely until we get to a point where there's a decision made around, can we live with it for now? Do we need to find next steps? But it's very mutual. So it's based on kind of that respect of others. And then after that, being strengths-based, a month later, whoever was part of that process, we all come back together and review the process and see how we can strengthen it and what else we can add to it. So we just keep growing it. So it's been quite a few years now. And I just hosted one earlier this year and strengthened it again. So that's just how we continue to grow it.
Perfect. Thank you so much for sharing.
And we can also talk, just give a quick story about our experience as an ABCD organization working on community economic development. And one of the stories that led us to this group, to Sabina and to Robin, to really think through how conflict transformation is core to our work. A lot of the work that we do is not necessarily geographically focused, meaning a lot of participants. We are a leadership training institution, so a lot of participants will come from all around the country. But in one particular program that's been going on for the past 5 years, we were focusing on geographic communities of place, and working with leaders from local government, community associations, and the private sector. And so one of the training programs that Cody was there supporting us through, we were doing a 5-day training program where we had ABCD as well as leadership development skill building modules. And conflict transformation was somewhere on the 3rd day, where we were really going to be looking at how do you deal with within your own organization the kind of conflicts that come up, and how can you manage these so that they can be productive. Needless to say, the entire group came in with a lot of baggage, a lot of experiences, the years and years of working together and or not working together. Understandings, misunderstandings, positive, negative experiences, different interpretations of things that had happened, essentially a shared history that had not been transparent. And so I think so many of us, ABCD at its core is such a transparent initiative. It's such an issue to bring forward a collectivization of the community assets, the community priorities, the community goals, as well as the different conflicts and the different ways that those conflicts have been perceived. And so just to make it quite short, over the course of the first half day, we realized that there were latent, that manifested into overt conflict based on, again, years and years of experience. And we had to spend the first 2 days essentially doing a very well facilitated talk therapy session to ensure that everybody felt heard, everybody had their different experiences in terms of partnerships, in terms of absolutely external resources coming in and undermining and or throwing off the balance of community initiatives, different perceived injustices, active injustices, things that every community goes through. And the process of us giving that intentional platform, that intentional space and significant space for conflict to be aired, conflict to be understood, conflict to be analyzed and discussed with a third party facilitator, but really between the different parties that were there and that were driving the different blocks, essentially, allowed us to overcome those blocks and allowed us to really create one of the more productive and most fruitful training platforms that we have ever had. And my child has just woken up, and so I'm going to pass it to Max to go through the rest of the session. My apologies. So Sabina, if you can go on to the next slide. We are going to be looking at essentially what are the high-level principles of ABCD and how can we think through, excuse me guys, how can we think through how that links into peace building. So essentially needs-based development focuses on poverty. Sabina, if you could click to the next animation. Right, and so asset-based development, we're focusing on assets, opportunities, resources, and drive. So when we're thinking about going towards peace building, how does asset-based thinking support that? And I invite anybody to give their idea. Anybody hand raised? Any experiences? Okay, so this is really looking at connectors, individuals, assets, shared principles, shared positive history, all of the language and all of the terminology that we understand really clearly with asset-based community development, and really looking at how does that process of ABCD, how does the process of collectivizing the shared assets, the shared goals, priorities, to identifying the social capital, the different opportunities that can be accomplished with that, how is that necessary for peace building? So in the breakout sessions, we're going to be looking at each one of these different 4 principles in depth. So Sabina, you can keep going, please. So thinking about links between where the action originates. So in need-based development, we're talking about top-down solutions, expertise to overcome deficits. With asset-based community development, we're talking about a reliance on internal leadership and local assets that ignite change. So really a local rooting. And then how does that link into the way we can approach peace building in an asset-based approach? And I invite anybody who has any experience, ideas, opinions, just raise your hand. Okay, well, we can keep going to the next one, which is not relying on external security or stabilization groups, but internal actors and ideas. And here is a question that's going to be really interesting. Roby is going to be talking a lot about this. Of course, in ABCD, we analyze and we think a lot about internal and external actors. And so that is an area in which there are quite different applications in terms of a peace building and violent context, where you are looking at security forces, you are looking at how people often think about the resolution of conflict, and versus a more asset-based approach to thinking through the roots of that conflict and how to get to a long-term solution. Sabina, the next slide, please. Ooh. Yeah, so again, need-based development, local actors as clients, consumers and beneficiaries. And the next one, please. And then looking at who are the actors, who are the players in the resolution of, well, in the asset-based community development field, but in the peace building field, Sabina, you can click to the next animation. Well, who are the actors in peace building? So who constructs peace in asset-based peace building? Who constructs peace anytime, essentially? Whether you're approaching it from an asset-based perspective or not, you are looking at the local actors who are living there and who are playing that role. So endogenous drive, local actors as drivers of peace. And we can go to the next slide. When we're talking about what are the results of need-based development, we're talking about service delivery, projects that address community needs in the short term. In terms of asset-based development, we're all very familiar with this. Well, in terms of asset-based delivery, we're talking about long-term movements for change, and that's that's practically the same language that we're talking about for the asset-based peace building. So we're talking about long-term strategies for peace versus short-term peace initiatives, essentially. So those are the 4 overarching links that we wanted to analyze within the breakout rooms. And I will now pass it over to Roby, who is going to give an example of how very obvious these 2 frameworks are in terms of their marriage. And so a lot of what I think we all do as ABCD practitioners is to think through how very obvious a lot of the principles that are at the heart of ABCD are. So to make them practical, to make them tangible, as they are to anybody who is living in a community and thinking through these things, it's similar in that way. When we're trying to de-jargonify, we're trying to de-sector, I have no idea what that word is, but we're essentially trying to just make the obvious connections between these very reasonable principles and effective principles clear. So Roby, off to you, unless anybody else has any other questions.
Thank you very much. So yeah, I'm going to talk a little bit about my community, CITE SOLEIL. So when I started, I said, okay, my background is community change and peace building. So I didn't choose that field because I go up there. So this is like the need, and I supposed to do this work to save my life and my community. So CITE SOLEIL is a commune in metropolitan Port-au-Prince. So Port-au-Prince, if you can imagine, there's about 7 communes in Port-au-Prince, but CITE SOLEIL is one of them. So CITE SOLEIL is a very dense commune, municipality. So there are a lot of people living there. So the number is about like 200,000, like the official numbers, but HAITI, sometimes we say maybe there's 500,000 people because the last time they did the census, it was like 15 years ago. I say because there are a lot of people there, so it's a very important for the political value. And I think that's why it's has, this problem because everyone wants to control CITE SOLEIL. And that's why CITE SOLEIL has a lot of like gang conflict between blocks. And then, when there was conflict, like there is criminal activities, there is violence, And CITE SOLEIL, since the beginning, CITE SOLEIL was already like isolated socio-economic community. So there's not much opportunity in CITE SOLEIL, no good school, no university. There's almost nothing in CITE SOLEIL, as you can say, like economic presence in CITE SOLEIL. And CITE SOLEIL must be recognized for its gang conflict. So after 2010, so because CITE SOLEIL was already known just for poor community, violent community, and then for us in Haiti, for many of us, the earthquake was something that we were supposed to take to build a better future. So in CITE SOLEIL, we gathered together because it was unusual to gather together all the blocks because, for example, I'm from CITE in CITE SOLEIL. So all my friends from CITE, so let's say less than one kilometer away, so I can't even go over there, so I don't have friends over there. So we took the opportunity of the earthquake to put people together. And we say, okay, let's start something to redefine our community CITE SOLEIL. So we founded Compete Soleil Levé as a social movement. So we base this movement in principle of Compete. So when you say Compete, like in Haiti, in our culture, it's mostly think about like solidarity, the participation. It's the way that people farm together in the rural area. So we wanted to take all the values, bring them to like a place like CITE SOLEIL to make Compete to change our image. Yes. And there is a small video, so we will play it, so may give you a background about Compete Soleil Levé.
Can we hear the video yet or no? Oh, here, let me see. Actually, maybe.
No, not yet.
I might ask you to share because you have a. I'm gonna stop so you can share because I think you had this worked out better earlier to share the video. Oh, sorry. Lucia, do you have that queued up? I think you had the.
Lucia, you're muted.
This video is very old. So I think it was like 2012 or 2013. So,
but it gives you a sense of the origins of the movement.
Yeah.
You can tell how long ago.
Okay, we don't have the sound for the video.
Just playing the video.
Just, yeah.
Dee, what was it you said before that if you'd stop sharing and then there was maybe Lucia needs to be unmuted?
Yeah, try stop sharing the screen. Yep. And then pretty much start.
Maybe I can.
Yeah,
Maybe
now
I
you
can.
have a little break.
Working?
It is.
La mentalité avant, il était très négative. Quel que soit longtemps, l'homme blanc, étranger venu, tout le monde toujours dit, ah, et quand vous venez faire, quand vous venez prendre une image, nous pourrons le vendre. CITE SOLEIL, c'est une zone côté qu'on jette tout sac pas bon, c'est là qu'ils ont jeter. Mais quand grand magasin nous pas jamais faire ça capable marcher, c'est parce que yo pas jamais inclus peuple là dans décision que yo prend. Ça sont ensemble des problèmes que nous étions victimes qui ont commencé à mobiliser, qui ont commencé à faire ça, qui ont comment pour essayer de cacher chaîne ça qui n'est pas visiblement dans mais une chaîne dans mentalité quand même. Objectif nous c'est changer image Cité Soleil et changer aussi et mentalité monde dans Cité Soleil.
Effectivement, oui, bon la caille salle, oui, bon la caille les fatra. Mais ça qui t'a surtout ennuyé nous, c'est par rapport à jouer sous misère nous pour te faire chez nous. Est-ce que nous pas ta bon tout, même force ou bien même dévouement que l'autre zone nous mettait pour changer réalité par là, est-ce que nous même tout nous pas qu'à faire? Est-ce que nous pas manger même jacques ça yo, est-ce que nous pas dormir, est-ce que nous pas monde? Alors c'est comme ça que fait nous t'es venu au niveau nous t'es toucher conscience ça yo. Nous tout prendre temps ça yo pour nous parler à nous sensibiliser, montrer l'importance côté une zone propre. Nous t'ai gagné équipe de maintenance ou bien équipe d'hygiène qui dans zone qui travaille chaque jour pour nettoyer. Si vous regardez ça auparavant, il pas comme ça. Et gen moun là qui pour observer moun qui passer qui jeter fatra, c'est comme ça que fait nous t'ai vinn arriver commencer entrer dans conscience moun pour montrer moun effectivement mais qui gens pour kembe une zone propre.
Esprit différence là en haut population dans périmètre côté yo fait activité ya yo vraiment différent par rapport avec l'autre zone.
C'est gon qui sont des volontés. Si mon n'a pas une volonté, me fait 2-3 ans à expliquer ça, le pape jamais comprendre. Nous avons commencé pour sur la différence, vient la référence, vient Noré, vient CITE. Moi c'est que si me fait un bail positif là ouais, les suivre, moi c'est marcher des zones en zone.
Et nous te font réunion ensemble pilote côté nous te chita pour boire ça. Nous te disons ça OK. Nous t'avons fait un mouvement qui a travaillé au profit de PEP ça. Qui peut faire plaidoyer pour PEP ça. L'on t'a regardé dans l'histoire pays d'Haïti qui ça combien nous te sorti c'est combien qui te fait chaîne dans pied nous. Et nous te dit OK, on a fait combien de soleil
nous fait volontairement, nous fait là tout nous-mêmes. Nous fait là tout sans nous. Mais
soleil levé c'est un mouvement qui 2-3 quartiers chaque nous constater que l'état démissionnaire, l'état pas existé même dans la commune Cité Soleil.
Approche nous t'a fait parce que il a changé la situation quand même. Parce que c'est pas ça mon nom veut non. C'est ça nous voulait appuyer.
C'est un mouvement là qui pas un président, pas un coordonnateur, tout le monde sous même longueur d'onde. Dans CA nous avons tout type de expertise. Nous avons monde qui fait féonique, nous avons monde qui fait chapeau, nous avons docteur en éducation. Nous avons tout type de capacités. Après formation, nous avons subi dans soleil levé. Ils viennent réaliser, ils planter, faire tout plan ça là.
Tout ça nous réaliser là, c'est à aide communautaire à réaliser parce que c'est aide communautaire là. Nous avons un projet qui est en projet de journée là qui est pont communautaire qui va nous manger pour nous faire c'est avec communautaire qui va nous manger qui fait nous réaliser là avec six pour eux qui est au travail n'a travail. Tout ça c'est partnership communautaire, les sorti la ville, les sorti l'école, pour traverser là pour rentrer là. C'est familiariser dans la communauté et puis avec support comme soleil levé qui font travail dans le monde qui fait monde comprendre ça journée aujourd'hui là.
Soleil tout Haïti c'est arrivé. L'autre Haïti ça salté. Dans les nous fait éduquer.
C'est un mouvement qui travaille pour changer la mentalité. Alors pour qu'il y ait un jour peuple Cité Soleil, même il prend destin en main.
Sous tout terre, c'est ça qui tourne, combi. Pour nous sauver en nation.
En 2004, qui était une zone rouge, et je ne dis là, elle passe à zone jaune. Parce que c'est la population qui accepte il faut que changer.
Au soleil levé, montrer que tout changement qui est pour côté, c'est pas monde qui a fait le coup d'abord. D'abord, c'est vous-même qui vivent là-dedans. C'est vous qui dormez là-dedans. Et si bon changement qui pour côté, c'est vous-même.
And a shout out to Brianne and Gord who were integral in producing that in 2013, I believe.
Hi, Brianna. Yeah, so as you can see in the video, so it was a very long time ago, about seven years ago. So this movement, we started this movement to change the community, but mostly to change people's mind, as many of them in the video say. And then one thing that we learn is to bring peace in our community. We have to take every single possibility in our way. Like you can see there were a lot of cleanup in the video. So CITE SOLEIL is very dirty, and then the government and the NGOs, they use trash as a tool to control CITE SOLEIL. And when we started the movement, we knew that we can go straight to the gang to say you have to stop the violence, because that's how they live. They live through violence. But we were trying to understand what the government or the actors use to control, to use the gang. Trash was one of them, because when they want to give them money, they start like project like Cash for Work, like to clean the community, and then they give it to to help people. But the gang with the leaders who control the neighborhood, they take that money to to buy guns, bullets, and to give more problem in CITE SOLEIL. Can you use this? So we started with cleaning our neighborhood. That's how we started to reunify all the groups, all the leaders together in CITE SOLEIL. Has Senati say in the video, the idea behind it, when we started with only one block, with La Reference. And then we make La Reference, which is Boaneuf Diallos, and then they start to clean the neighborhood. And CITE get in, and Projet Douya get in, and many blocks get in. So we use that we used to use the term virus. So we want something, one fast as a virus, to affect people's mind, and then to really take their responsibility. So we use like, artists, singers, and many groups, and do like some crazy activities. As you can see in the screen, this is like an Eiffel Tower in CITE in my blog. So people may see it and say, this is crazy, but it's not crazy. It's really a tools of peace that my community want to put up there. Because when we started, there's nothing in the community that we as the resident we do. There were a gang in this neighborhood, and he said that once, he said, everything you see is the NGOs or government. So people don't see us as human. And they say, we rename our neighborhood Paris. We want to build our own Eiffel Tower. And then this is 1% of the original one in Paris. But they made it. So we gathered together, people, everyone do what they can, look for little bars everywhere, look for like local professional, and we made it. I remember when we inaugurated, it was really a huge party, but it was a local success, and it's meant a lot for this community. So use anything like breakdance. So when you have a lot of young people, there's no job. So those people have to use their energy, and we try to move them in a positive way to use their own energy. Like breakdance, as you can see in the, so CITE SOLEIL, as we say, very marginalized. And we use sport like a tools of peace. So those guys, each of them from a different neighborhood, we put them together to go out of CITE SOLEIL to play, to represent CITE SOLEIL. So when they back together. So why they have to fight against each other when they can gather together to defend CITE SOLEIL? So this is a kind of example that we use. And this is me and my friend son. So we were very, very young. Now we are getting old. Yeah, you can pass on. So, and then we choose like some events, some symbolic day for the country, where people can remind of their story, of their past. Like this one is January 12th. So we went we gathered people from Cité Soleil go to Titan. That's where the mass grave of people death 2010 of the earthquake. So that was really powerful because we gathered together, we go there, and Cité Soleil is the, let's say, is the only one community in Haiti still doing that. So for them, and then newsletter talk about it, so people use that as they have something they can contribute to the country. You know, every symbolic day, like some peaceful march, use the schools, the pupils, the students. So we do everything that we can to keep the peace, because when people talk about peace, us as change maker or peace builder, we can't create peace. This is not under our control. But what we can do, we can actually keep it. When they give us the peace, we can keep it. And what we do to keep it, it's many activities. Like this picture was Simon Pele. They were like a big fight between Cité Soleil, my community, and another community named Simon Pele. There were a lot of people get killed by this time. So that's the only time that we put our community together and the other community to say, we going to talk to the gang. And then we went a big full of people, and we went out, we said, we won't going to accept that anymore. We need a space to live. So that was really powerful movement. That and this time we actually go out, talk to the gang and say, we need peace back. That was in Simon Pele. And then in 2014, there are a lot of young people like me everywhere in Cité Soleil doing great things, but because of the stigmatization from Cité Soleil, so no one really recognized young leaders there. So, and then this time I started the movement, the prize named Cité Soleil Peace Prize, to recognize young people, like young ordinary people doing like extraordinary stuff in Cité Soleil. Actually tomorrow going to be 7th annual of Cité Soleil Peace Prize and 9th anniversary of Cité Soleil of Combit Soleil Levé. So yeah, so tomorrow we're going to recognize 3 other young leaders, which is, and where we are talking now, Cité Soleil has big tension. There's conflict everywhere, but we're trying to keep looking for young leaders.
Lost Sabina. Where is it? It seems we've lost Sabina.
Yeah, I'm not sure what happened. Okay. Yes, so
Sabina
we've
is still here, but
lost.
for some reason we can't hear them. Okay. Joining now. It seems they lost their connection. Okay.
Yeah, so they should be back or making their
They're
way
joining
back.
now.
And yeah.
Reno, can you hear us?
I'm sorry.
Yes.
Sabina's phone went out. And then, yeah, so the State Peace Prize is gonna be tomorrow. And as I was saying, so this time right now, there is big conflict in Cité Soleil. So since 4 months, and then what we can do is keep doing like positive activities like that to see how peace can back. And then one thing, another initiative that we launched in 2015, 17, the Combit Bibliothèque Cité Soleil. It's a Combit library. As we say, Combit is togetherness. So one thing that we know, we notify in our community, there's no like community space. There's no library. There's like, we have Sakala, but it's mostly for young children. But we say, maybe we need something that can unify people and put it a very unique place where can connect people everywhere. So actually right now we are putting together to build, like, it's gonna be the biggest library in Haiti. So we are trying to raise like 50 million goods from 10,000 people. And right now we are 177 weeks since we started. We're almost there. We have already 6,000 donors, and the idea is to get money and books and from 10,000 people that we can use that as an example. That if CITE SOLEIL can do it, can put 10,000 people together to build a library, why not? The country can put together like 10 million people, 12 million people can put together to rebuild Haiti. So we use like donation from everywhere, donation from the blocks, children, even the gang. We're trying to make them participate because we know if we are doing something with people, for people, it will be like more durable. So this is the library buildings, but we are very, very far right now. So that's it. Oh, so we have better picture right now for the library. We are almost there. We are actually in 50% to finish it, but we stopped because of the COVID, and then right now there is violence in CITE SOLEIL. We're trying to bring back peace to continue with the project. So thank you very much.
Yeah, and I think we can talk more about this in breakout groups, but what's kind of important for, I think, for the purpose of this conversation, and if we've heard us talk for long enough, so we're going to shut up soon.
And Sabina, we have issues hearing you well.
This is really like a hyper local approach to peace. Like this was the entire idea, was to just turn the way that things have been done. These external NGO-driven projects. There was a UN peacekeeping force in Haiti. There were government interventions. CITE SOLEIL. There were government interventions.
Vina, just speak a little bit closer to the phone if you could.
And so having, this be able to, is just a different model that we think is interesting to talk about in this context. So.
There's a lot of really interesting comments from the chat. Does anybody want to share some of those with the group?
Oh.
Please feel free
Sorry.
to raise hand if you want to share stories that are related to the topic we're discussing. So
can you back again? So sorry, it was on my headphone. And
yeah.
Hello?
Yes, we can hear you now, Robbie.
Yeah. Is there any question for me or?
Okay, well, I think if there's no questions, and the rest of what we're going to do is we're going to be breaking into 4 groups. Each group is going to take one of the principles that Lucia and Max talked about, and we're going to kind of look at, thanks for this. Yeah, where is kind of, ask about this question in the context of the example from CITE SOLEIL, and then talk about how these might apply to our own examples and our own experiences. Because again, the whole point is that this is not some magic formula or secret information. It's something we all apply in our day-to-day lives. So I think there'll be one of us, at least in each group. I'm not exactly sure how that's going to work. But we're going to break out and facilitate that. We'll probably have like 20 minutes to talk, then we'll come back, share out, and then have some final reflections, and then move on with our days and lives.
Yeah, so if everybody could please, I think we're going to be doing this with everybody adding the number of the group that they want to participate in at the end of their name. So you can go into the participant list and rename yourself and just add that number, and then we'll allocate people out. I'm sorry, Robin, is that what you were going to add?
Yeah. Yeah, and there was just a comment from Gord to put the focus of for each group into the chat. So somebody could do that. Okay.
Can I put my computer?
Yeah. Yeah.
Hmm? Can you send me?
Okay, so people can see them there. So if there's just how you put the number in front of your name. And then once that's done, then I will put people into the groups that they want. Can you put it in your, put the number in front of your name on your thumbnail and your participant name and not in the chat, please?
And so just to reiterate, I'll be in group 1. I think we'll be 2, Sabina 3, and then Robin 4.
Right, but Roby and Sabina are sharing a device. They cannot be in separate groups.
Right, okay, so then Max.
But maybe I can put. So make sure you put your name at the number at the beginning because it won't necessarily show up if it's at, it won't show up for me at the end. And if you don't put a number in front of your name, you'll just be randomly assigned a group. And Dee, can I leave you in the large main group though for people?
I'm happy to stay in the lobby for if anyone jumps back here.
Okay, great. Thank you so much.
And so Robin, correct me if I'm wrong, but I think it's going to be a pretty informal report back, just talking about any key insights or takeaways. So each group can select somebody, or the facilitators can do so. But it'd be great to have some other participants share their experiences with the rest of the group.
Yeah. Thank you for your patience. I think we got it. Okay, so I'm gonna put people into groups and you said 20 minutes, right? Or do we want to say 15 because it's 6:22? 20?
Yeah, I think we can do 15 minutes and then report back.
Okay, so I'll put in the groups for 15 minutes. You'll there'll be a countdown, and then we will come back to large group. All right, here we go. So when you get a message, please follow the link to go to your group.
Can anyone there hear me?
I can be. I'm actually still not in the right room. I need to be in the breakout room 3.
Right. So I can't speak to Robin now because we're in these separate rooms. So I sent her an email and said, can you give me hosting rights back so I can send people? But it depends if she sees that email, unless you can contact her some other way.
Yeah. Oh, well.
Because, yeah, at the moment I can't. Oh, no,
I think
actually, I should be able to reclaim hosting rights because I was that first, right? Where's my settings? Aha.
So apparently I'm still in the wrong room. I now need to be in room 2.
Okay, well, I've just reclaimed.
The one where I'm supposed to be.
I've just reclaimed my rights. So let me find you. Where are you? Breakout room 1, 2. We're not in a breakout room, are we? Where's your name?
I'm Sabina. I think this one I'm in Sabina Carlson, not just Sabina.
Oh, it says Sabina not joined. But that's the one that's just Sabina.
Yeah, that one, this is Sabina Carlson.
Here we go. Here we go. Which room do you want to go to?
I think 2.
Move to. Hi, Patrick. Can you hear me? You there, Patrick?
I was in a group and I lost them.
Right.
And I don't know how I got to you, but
do you know which number?
I was in group number 4.
Right. I can put you back there.
Thank you.
See you later.
Thanks.
All right, so people are going to start coming back. That was quite the adventure in making those breakout rooms. Oh my gosh. Thanks, Dee, for being, being on this part of that to help with that. Oh my gosh.
It's okay. I had a bit of a panic when I was like, oh my God, I can't do anything with anyone now. I made you the host. So then I found a way to reclaim.
Oh.
So all good, all good.